Hello everyone, producer Dave here. Sorry for the longer absence, life got in the way a bit. This is a talk Mike and Richard had with our very good friend Rosie about worship. It ended up being a bit of a longer session, so I split it into a two-parter. Part 1 is more about why we worship, and Part 2 is a bit more about the practicals of doing sung worship on a Sunday morning. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hello. Welcome everyone to our Richard and Mike Do Food podcast this week. Today we are going to be talking about worship, and we've got a special guest on today. Hello, Rosie.
Hello.
So Rosie's our friend, and she's joining us on our podcast today. We also, of course, have producer Dave kicking around. So Rosie's with us today because she has got, she is just well up for a bit of worship, really, basically, and is just probably one of the most kind of passionate and knowledgeable people I know about kind of worship, and has got a real, we say that kind of jargon phrase, someone has a heart for something, but I think that's very true for Rosie, and when it comes to worship, she's just through and through a worshipper, both I think in kind of singing and in deed as well. So yeah.
Wow.
So that's why Rosie's joining us. Well, yeah, there you go. High praise indeed.
Got a lot to live up
Don't
to
get
now.
carried away.
Yeah.
So yes, so we're going to be talking about worship today. I love a bit of worship as well. I like to drum in a band for worship and that kind of thing, but also that's really quite a surface level thing, I think. And Rich, are you bothered about worship or not?
I do like worship. I love worship, but I'm not worship. I haven't got any talents when it comes to worship. I haven't got any musical talent, but I can
When it comes
join in.
So that's singing worship.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Yes, I can do worship in life. That's very true. But in terms of like singing worship, no, I'm very much on the sidelines.
On the sidelines. You're in there, mate.
I'm in there. I'm in there.
So yeah, we're going to talk about worship today. We're going to have a little bit of an explore about what it is and kind of what we think it means and the kind of significant elements to it. I think we're going to pretty much focus around the kind of singing worship kind of stuff that people might be more familiar with doing in a kind of church or kind of community or gathering setting. But of course, there's so much more to worship than that. And arguably that is just kind of like just really one facet or one element of it, really, isn't it?
It is. So in terms of food for today, we
How
have
could
some...
we forget the food?
The food, I know, it's part of the name.
Do you know what? I just started it without everyone else is sitting there like, no, don't start it yet. We've got to... And I've just taken like some kind of big chunky bite.
We wanted to save it so that our listeners could enjoy the true first bite and our enjoyment of it. But
I couldn't resist, and I feel immensely hypocritical having just been trying to persuade my children to stop just wolfing down the food as soon as it touches the table in front of them. But whenever we have dinner at the moment, you know, if you're hungry, I guess. So yeah, not a great start for me. But there we go. Sorry, Rich.
it's okay. So we've got some, I think it's cashew nut biscotti made by my wife, and it's been dipped in chocolate. Now, apparently biscotti, I think, Rosie, you might know more about this than me. It's twice baked, is it?
I think so. Yeah.
Do you know any more than that? Or?
No. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
kind of toasty, isn't
Set
it?
me up there. Yeah.
It's kind of like a kind of toasting kind of vibe, isn't it? It's kind of crispy.
Yeah.
I mean, this podcast is called Richard and Mike Do Food, and all of us are sitting here, we've
Oh,
got no
really?
idea about what we're doing. That's obviously not what it's about at all. But yes, they look very nice.
Let's give it a go.
Very good. And it's a bit less complicated than last time with trying to
With the
extract...
plate. Oh, gosh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Like chocolate shells. Yeah, let's have a crack. Yours is much crunchier than mine.
Really glad I invested in those new microphones now.
Are you getting a good crunch on that?
They're going to have a nice...
It's quite nice.
have a nice dusting on them by the time we're done today.
So before we started filming, we were talking about it, and Dave's wife said, "You know, you're supposed to have this with coffee because I don't really do hot drinks." So it's just like, it's really hard. It's really crunchy. It's supposed to be dipped in coffee.
Sorry, just to interrupt you, to give everyone context here, Richard literally only drinks water in his life. I'm not. There's no exaggeration there at all.
I have a nice glass of
He's
water here
actually
with
got
me.
a glass of water now.
There we go.
Beautiful, man. I'm going to try the chocolatey end now.
Have you not tried the chocolatey end? It's very nice, isn't it? Did you dunk it as well?
I dunk it.
That's the crunchy bit.
I can hear the crunch from here, Mike. So, worship. I think we can start from a place of really, and you kind of touched on this already, Mike, with my thing of saying that I'm not musically talented. What is worship? What would we say it is?
I mean, where do you start?
Yeah, there's so much, isn't there?
I suppose for us in church, I mean, that can look very different, can't it? You can have what they refer to as sung worship. You could have spoken word. You could have dance. You could have flags and ribbons, and all sorts. But I suppose primarily the focus is on sung worship, and that is generally how most, I think, congregational meetings and Sunday mornings are structured, around a bit of sung worship, and you often then get a sermon or a little preachy bit. So yeah, but then you could also argue that worship is, I worship God in the things I do and how I live my life.
Yeah.
And then that just opens up another aspect of what is worship. But I'd say the main thing is that it's designed to bless him and to give him praise and glory. So I suppose that translates to the other part of that, what we do in life and how we conduct ourselves is worship to him, is worshipping him in what we're doing. I suppose that then is about honouring him. But yeah, I'd say the main thing is that he is the focus. He is the person that we are worshipping in that way.
Yeah. So I suppose that's the kind of adoration, like something you really adore. You're going to worship in some form or other, aren't you?
Yeah.
And that would normally yield some kind of action on your part, whether that's worshipping God or worshipping whatever it might be. New musical instrument or computer game or I don't know.
Yeah, and I think we were kind of designed to worship. So if we're not worshipping God, we end up worshipping something else.
Yeah.
So like you were saying, it could be a game, it could be a football show, it could be football, it could be a TV show. And I think that's how we are. We need something to worship. And I think we worship things without even realising that we do it.
You do. I suppose it fills that need or that kind of hardwired that we have as humans, isn't it? To put ourselves in abandonment towards something. Or I suppose sometimes the worship can be ourselves as well. That's maybe our kind of default point. Probably we're all doing that in some format or other.
Like you could definitely be rocking up on a Sunday or whenever you have church and be fully engaged with worship, but there are other aspects of your life where those things can easily become consuming without us even realising, without us necessarily being intentional about worshipping those things. But when you strip it back, they are our driving force, or they are the reason why we do things or say things, or where our dependency is and where our trust is. And it can so easily kind of veer to that. So I know some people that I know have to be careful about what they watch, like kind of like TV programmes and films and stuff, just because actually they realise that they can get pulled into quite a negative attitude about things. Or you just think about, if we actually concerted all of our efforts into worshipping God, like what that would actually look like in our life.
So I had a thing recently where I felt really challenged to do something. Like I felt like I was getting those kind of thoughts from God and just saying, okay, this would be a good thing to do. He was challenging me to kind of step out a little bit in something. And I was a bit like, no, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it. No, it's naff. It's rubbish. It's a bit cheesy or whatever. But I just, when that thought just doesn't leave you, you have to be like, oh, man, really? And so there came a point where I just had to make a decision if I was going to do it at that point or not. There was like a deadline or something. And in the end I said, well, okay, I'm either not going to do it and it's not going to happen, or I'm going to do it and it will be naff and cheesy, but actually, even if I've heard God wrong, or even if it is rubbish, I've still done what I thought he was telling me to do. And so, and so it's kind of like almost at that point, you're like, okay, now I've got the choice laid out in front of me like that. Am I going to worship him and abandon myself to him or not? It becomes less of a choice then, doesn't it, I suppose? And I suppose you could say, no, absolutely not, actually. Of course, the choice is still there. But so that was a bit of a wrenching process to go through. But it felt kind of worshipful in a kind of messy and ugly kind of way. Yeah. So
I find one of the things that as a society we're kind of geared to worship is the whole idea of jobs and careers. So like obviously we work in education, so there's the whole idea that you're trying to get kids to perform their best so they've got the most options. But I think it doesn't all just end there, because once you finish school you might have university, you might go to work, and then it's ultimately the whole idea of career, because that's something quite significant and you want to be good at it, you want to do well, but actually that can really become something that we worship, and you sometimes see that, and like I sometimes notice that kind of stuff in myself where I want to be seen to be doing well, and that'll be a motivator. And I think I have to really watch myself, and I think it's something that society kind of breeds into us, that we have to almost live to work. To do well in life is doing well at work. So how would you say, like, Rosie, it'd be good to get your input on this. How would you say this all relates to, like, song, singing, worship, the thing that you would traditionally do on a Sunday, and what are your thoughts on that as well?
So, yeah, I suppose on a Sunday you kind of normally gather together and whoever's leading you would, like, have some songs prepared, or, you'll have a time of worship. And I suppose the big thing for me is it's always been about a place of, okay, so how do you prepare your heart to not only meet with Jesus yourself, but how do you be sensitive to helping lead others in that? And I'd say definitely God's taken me on a journey. I mean, I've been part of a worship team since I was about 11, I think. And that's looked very different over the years as God's kind of met me and taught me and guided me, and where I've been challenged. And it's gone from a place of performance and from a place that's been driven by people saying, oh, you've done a good job, or that sounded really nice, to a place of, I'm not satisfied that this is where we are, or this is kind of how we are worshipping. And I think ultimately it requires sacrifice on our part. It requires our hearts to be in the right place and for the intent to be there. And I think if that's not, then we can play a good set and sound quite nice and people leave feeling, oh, that was nice. But that's so empty, really, in comparison to what I suppose what God is deserving of, and also what he wants to do in the process of us worshipping him, how he wants to meet us in it. And I mean, that's always been a weird kind of notion that actually I'm here to give him the glory, but he wants to bless me at the same time. And I think it's how do you make sure that your position is not about, okay, what can I get from this and how is it feeding me, to actually, no, I want to be at a position where I can lay this at his feet and give him the glory and my all in that. Because I mean, when we stand and we say I'm in awe, and I my heart, like that's the song The Stand, about I stand with arms high and heart abandoned. Is my heart abandoned? Is my focus completely there? Is it on Jesus? Because that's been a really challenging song for me to sing at times, because I think when you actually really think about what you're singing, they're challenging, and it's not all happy clappy kind of, girl guide. It's real, isn't it? Like, yeah. It requires something of us. And I think it's a fine line, because I think, like I say, God still wants to bless us in that, and there is an element of bringing our kind of selves into alignment. So we have to kind of speak of those things about what he's doing, what he's done for us, but also that it has to lead to a place of, because you're worthy of it all, so I'm going to give you the praise. And yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, where do you stop with that? But that's, I think has been my heart in it, that actually, okay, so how do we get ourselves into that position where we are, truly entering in with our hearts in the right place, with our kind of focus on him, but also being open to him meeting us and healing us or giving us encouragement or speaking to us, or I think it's getting the balance, isn't it?
So you mentioned the whole idea of God blessing us and us receiving from God. What does that mean?
So I'd say that, like, when I've, I suppose, been in a place where I've been ministering a song, so when I've been singing a song at church, just myself, that as I've done that, God's really met me. And actually you'd see that as, okay, God's going to use me as a kind of a mouthpiece in this moment, that the aim is that I want God to speak through this song and I want people to really be ministered to in this way. But actually I realised that I was so focused on making sure that my heart was right, that I was actually completely missing that actually he wanted to fill me in the process, that he wanted to bless me as I was ministering. And I think that's that kind of thing about positioning ourselves and making sure that it's not about what we're giving out, but actually it's aligning ourselves so that as we give out and as we are obedient in that kind of, we're here to worship and here to lead people, that there is that expectation that he will meet us and that he will fill us up. At various times when I have kind of been ministering at various points, it's been quite vulnerable, because actually if I was to allow God to really minister to me as I was kind of wanting and being expectant for others, that's really tough and quite challenging. But actually it's so much more than just getting up and singing a song. And I think that's just through the goodness of God, isn't it? That actually we don't deserve anything from him.
Yeah.
And actually he's the one who's paid the ultimate price for us. And so this is, how can we not worship him? But it says in the Bible, doesn't it, he sings over us. And that kind of notion that, he's there to bless us too. But I think it's making sure that we're not driven by that. We're not driven by, okay, well, what can I get out of this? What's for me? And I think sometimes the way certain songs are written, or the way kind of certain songs are sung or brought, it can kind of feed that kind of soulish bit in us that, like, I need to know that I am good and worthy and whatever. And those things are true, but I think it's the balance.
I think that's really interesting, because I think, so before I became a Christian, I was going to church, my family went to church, and song worship in particular, was just singing songs on a Sunday. And I thought that was it, that's what you do. You go to church and you sing songs, and that's how you worship God. But that whole idea that you're talking about of God meeting with us, of God blessing us, it wasn't really until I became a Christian that I realised that, there is something in this, that you can experience God in a very real way, in a very even physical way, that you can have an encounter with the King of Heaven, that through us worshipping him, he comes down from heaven, he meets with us. And I think that's just amazing. And I think that was a real turning point for me. And what you're saying about people wanting to get blessed and being in worship so they can get something, I can completely relate to that, because I think where God is faithful like that and he comes to meet us in our worship, it's not us coming to him, but he comes to meet with us. I think it can be really tempting to go and worship him so that we can get something out of it. We can get that good feeling, or we can get that mountaintop experience, as some people refer to it.
And when you do meet with God in those times, there's often something a little bit different or special when you do it in a community setting, like with other people there, because obviously he meets us wherever, whatever. But it's so good. Yeah, you're meeting the creator of the universe, and he reveals things to you. You know, we talk about hearing from God and things like that. It can happen in such a powerful way in those settings, and you notice things, or you have stuff shown to you from him that you would never see or realise otherwise. I mean, yeah, of course you're going to want more of that. Like, and if that is a time where there isn't an element of people, sometimes people talk about thinness, don't they? You heard of this idea about the thin places or thin.
Could you elaborate
times?
for us?
Yeah, so like where it's kind of like there's less of a space or feeling of a wall or gap between earth and heaven, and so there's like an ease with which we can interact with God and the Holy Spirit in those times or in those places. And often people talk about God inhabiting a particular place, or whatever term you use. And of course, if we're saying that's our design and that's.
And I don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
want that thing. I think we naturally are kind of designed to need that kind of. I need to know that I am worthy and I'm accepted and I'm loved and I'm forgiven. That is just part of our makeup, isn't it? But I think when it becomes the driving force, and when you are, say, like when you talk about a mountaintop experience, when it becomes the focus of, okay, I'm chasing this feeling, I'm chasing this, or I'm in it to see what God's going to give me, it winds up empty. It's good for the moment and you could live off of it for a little while, but if we're just living off of those feelings, how much are we missing out on? And I think that's the thing, that God is good and he will honour that and he will meet us where we are, and we're not all in a position to be, yeah, God, I'm going to give you all the glory because you're worthy, worthy, worthy. And actually that's not about neglecting where we're at, because actually what's inside doesn't always reflect, God, you're worthy, I trust you, I think it's about being real where we're at, but it's about recognising that irrespective of where I am, Jesus is still worthy to be praised. And I think that's been my challenge and my kind of where I've kind of really met God is actually it's what's going on for me. It matters to him and it is important, but he is all being and all seeing, and he knows that, and he knows my heart, and he knows those things, and he wants my heart. And I think that's it's that kind of notion that actually, look, this stuff that's going on, it's really difficult, it's really hard for me, and actually me standing up and saying, I trust you, I give it to you, is really difficult. But actually there is that kind of thing of, well, I just want your heart, and I suppose that's that kind of expectation that we can lay those things before him and say, God, help me to get to that place of being able to stand and give you the glory. So I think it's not about cutting off the whole me, I, because that has its place and it is important. And I think it's not about neglecting that within us, but it's about having the balance and what, I suppose, what is the intent? Is the intent about chasing a feeling or getting something from it, or is it giving God the glory?
Yeah, because I suppose a successful time, if you can put a success matrix on these things, or a success metric on these things, of worship, when we're talking specifically about worshipping together as a service or whatever, the successful time is that he's been honoured. Yeah. Like, it might sound awful. It might you might not have noticed anything of his presence in the room. It might be completely the wrong key, or everyone's singing in different keys. It might be completely out of time. But if me as an individual, kind of weighing in with the community you're with, have stood together and honoured him through whatever we've been doing, and in that case it's singing, then that's enough. That's what the point is, isn't it?
Thanks for listening. That was episode 2. Episode 3, continuing the conversation, should be available soon. As ever, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the chat today. Please get in touch with us on our site at www.richardandmike.com, that's with an AND in the middle, by email at info@richardmike.com, and on Instagram with @richardandmike. Thanks again. See you next time.